Every Thanksgiving, my family had a special tradition. We'd all go to our old cabin deep into the woods. The cabin had been in our family for a long time and smelled like aged wood. It was a special place to be thankful and enjoy each other's company. It felt peaceful with the forest outside. My aunt was in charge, making a big Thanksgiving meal on a long wooden table with family heirlooms. The food was yummy and everything seemed just right. No weird feelings or strange vibes or anything. As the evening went on, we laughed and talked, feeling cozy with the candlelight and dancing on the cabin's wooden walls. Everything seemed usual and calm. After we ate, I thought a walk in the woods would help my digestion. The forest always gave me peace. I stepped out under the starry sky, taking in the cool air and the soft sound of leaves rustling. There was still about half an hour before it would be pitch dark outside, so I decided to go a little bit deeper into the forest. Very quickly, the smell of pine trees and rain was disturbed with the smell of something really horrible. It almost smelled rotten. As I walked deeper into the woods, the smell only grew. At the time, I figured it must be some dead animal, but I never knew I would be this wrong. 5 to 10 minutes went by, and the smell was stronger than ever. Suddenly, to my right, I hear some branches break. Looking around distracted, I stumbled over something. At this point, my stomach was churning, and all that Thanksgiving food was making its way into my mouth. My body hit the hard rock bottom of the ground in pain. I got up and my hands were covered in this dark mud or so. At least I thought it was mud. I looked to see what I tripped over, and I was frozen with fear and horror. There was this body. It had several wounds around the face and dried blood all around the body. The horrible smell was the smell of decaying. The mouth was open and half the skin rotten. I threw up right then and there. My heart raced as I stood there, paralyzed with fear. The body was so far gone I couldn't even make out a face. As I stare at the horror in front of me, I hear some more branches cracking. Closer this time. Quickly snapping out of the paralysis, I ran back to the cabin. My legs burning out of exhaustion, ready to give out. I pushed myself. I could hear what sounded like footsteps behind me. It felt like I had been running for an hour now. It was almost dark outside, and I didn't have my phone with me to call or use the flashlight. As I was trying to remember the route back to the cabin, I could hear the footsteps gaining on me. Suddenly, I see an opening in the woods and this light coming from the cabin. Stumbling back to the cabin, opening the door, I collapse on the floor and I throw up once again. I yell for someone to call the police. Without asking why, my aunt dials for the police. The look on my face was enough to convince them that it was urgent. While we waited, I told them what had happened. About half an hour later, the police arrived. I told them what I saw and where the body was, and we left. When I got home, I unpacked my bag, and I found this photo. Looking at the picture, my heart stopped. It was a picture of me, standing over the body of the girl, and what I read next chilled me to my spine. On the bottom of the picture, in some sort of red ink, it said, "You got lucky, or you would have been next." So I'm a male nurse at a large hospital in San Francisco. I work in the ER, and as is custom, Thanksgiving night it was very busy. Now my wife is also a nurse for the same hospital. She works in labor and delivery, between babies being born left and right and the people coming into the ER. We hadn't had a chance to take a break together as we try to do every shift. So when she called, I figured it was to say she wanted to meet up for a bite to eat in the cafeteria. When I answered, I heard in the background a male voice screaming profanities, and my wife, who is fluent in Spanish, trying to calm this guy down. She told me their pager wasn't working and they needed security stat. I quickly hung up and called for security, told my fellow nurses what was going on and ran for labor and delivery, worried sick about my wife. When I ran almost square smack dab into this visibly angry man. He wasn't huge, but bro definitely worked out and not at the gym. He was covered in prison tattoos and he was obviously a banger. I work out regularly, but I knew this guy could kick my ass. He looked at me and gave me this sick grin and started heading towards me, sprouting off in Spanish. I don't speak fluent Spanish, but what I could understand scared the living shit out of me. I'm backing up as fast as I can, and I start buzzing the door to the ER frantically for them to let me in. These guys are literally a foot away from me, and the door opens and I'm pulled to safety by a doctor. The gangbanger punches the door a few times. He makes a dragging sign across his throat while grinning at both of us. Next thing I know, the police rush into the corridor he's in, and it takes 2 security officers and 2 cops to subdue this guy. I finally make it to my wife, who thankfully was shaken up but unhurt. She explained to me what happened. A young girl, only 14, came in with a high fever, vomiting, and a distended belly. The banger claimed he was her brother and they needed to cut her open to get her baby. They did an ultrasound, and to their horror, they realized she wasn't pregnant. She had bags of drugs in her stomach. It's very common for drug mules to bring over a young woman from Mexico carrying drugs that way. Homeboy freaked out when they informed him his sister needed emergency surgery. And no, he wasn't getting his drugs. Thankfully, the girl survived, but the sad thing is, she's most likely going to be deported once she recovers. In our old creaky farmhouse, Thanksgiving was a big deal. The house was ancient, and you can hear the floorboards complaining every time you took a step. It was drafty, but it was where we liked to spend our Thanksgiving. So there we were, the whole family, gathered around the dinner table for our Thanksgiving dinner. The place smelled like turkey and pumpkin pie, mixed with that old, musty house smell. But this year, things felt weirder than usual. We were just getting into the meal when the lights went out, and we were left in the dark. Quick as we were, we got some candles going and found our flashlights. The house was eerily quiet, and then we heard this scraping noise coming from the kitchen. It was like a knife on a cutting board. Dad, being the fearless one, said he'd check it out. He headed to the kitchen, but it felt like he took forever to come back. The scraping noise kept going, getting louder and more unsettling. We got worried and decided to go check up on him. When we reached the kitchen, there was Dad, standing there like a statue, holding a knife. He was slicing the turkey, but he was in some kind of trance. His eyes were black as night, and his face had a cold, unsettling look. He didn't react to our calls. It was like he didn't even notice us. We were about to snap him out of it when suddenly the lights flickered back on. He slowly turned towards us. His eyes were still dark as coal. He had this eerie, cold look on his face. He didn't even flinch when we called out to him, and a chill ran down our spines. With a voice colder than the wind outside, he said, "You should have stayed away. They don't like visitors." As we tried to get him to snap out of it, I felt a sharp, burning sensation on my back. It was as though something had scratched me, but there was no one behind me, and I couldn't explain it. Then, out of nowhere, Dad began yelling in a voice that sent shivers down our spines. His words were incomprehensible, like he was speaking in some ancient ghostly tongue. He suddenly started bashing his head against the wall. We were in shock, unable to move when he abruptly stopped, his face twisting in a horrible grin. With an unsettling calmness, he said, "Leave at once, or it will not be a pleasant ending." Then he turned back to the turkey and resumed slicing, like nothing had happened. We didn't know what to make of it. We were too scared to do anything but return to our seats. As we continued our meal, we couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The turkey on the table had been sliced into perfect, identical pieces, as if it had been done by a machine. The rest of the evening went smoothly, nothing too weird or unexplainable. We were still uneasy but stayed the night, and figured our dad was probably messing with us. The next day we drove back home, and I stayed up late that night playing on my Xbox. Then I heard something hitting the wall coming from the basement. Mind you, it was about 2 a.m., and hesitantly I make my way downstairs and grab the broom from the closet just in case. I open the door, and the noise grows louder. I turn on the light and make my way downstairs. There was a man standing there with his back to me, banging his head against the wall. "Hello?" I hesitantly say. The man stops and turns around, eyes pitch black.